Thanks for tuning in to our seller interview series. Up today, we got an Adsense and Amazon site for sale in the health and fitness niche. Created in December 2014, this business makes $1,792 per month in net profit. The listing number for this site is 40527. This sale will involve the domain, email list, and Facebook page. Now, we do these interviews to give potential buyers more information about both the seller and the sites they're looking to purchase. We hope these insights are helpful for you in making a buying decision. Now, we got the seller with us today to go through this business in a little bit more detail and cover everything from niche selection to traffic and monetization. Thanks for coming on, Mike.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem, man. So first of all, I want to ask, can you tell us a little bit about your background in building and running online businesses?
Sure, definitely. So I come from a background of technology, so I'm pretty familiar with just kind of internet technology in general. So I've worked in the IT space for quite some time, and I've been interested in really pursuing online business or acquiring an online business for a while. And looking around, it's been kind of difficult, or was difficult, to really locate a business that both was from a trustworthy seller as well as had the kind of revenue and aspects that I was interested in. Wouldn't really require a day-to-day maintenance type of activity. So, maybe 7 months ago or so, I discovered Empire Flippers and was really refreshed to find that there was a business brokerage site that would allow me to actually find sites that were vetted and would provide things like the revenue and fully kind of holistically looking at the different aspects of the businesses. So as a buyer, I could feel confident that, going into and purchasing that kind of venture would be something that I would be able to, immediately kind of leverage as well as over time expand. So I'm relatively new, I would say, to the online business market. I do have a technology background, so I understand the basics of working with websites and everything like that. It was kind of just finding the right opportunity and working with the right business to be able to make that, actually possible.
Yeah, absolutely. You didn't start this site from scratch. You actually bought it from our marketplace. So how did you come up with the idea for this site in particular, in terms of what was it about this site versus, say, another AdSense and Amazon affiliate site that made you choose this one over another?
Sure. So with this particular site, it was in the health niche, and I'm definitely, interested in health. I love working out, and I'm definitely very health conscious. So it was something that I was familiar with, and I really was interested in that kind of topic to begin with. So that was something that was attractive to me. Again, the site was also built up to rank on certain keywords fairly well, or actually very well, being in the first couple spots within Google. So that was important too, because I don't really have much of an SEO or marketing background. So I wasn't really as familiar with how to properly rank up sites, so they can get to that level. So it was nice to be able to, have a site that both was a niche that I could relate to and understand, as well as something that was already had a lot of the SEO work done for it. So I'd be able to kind of get right in there and do modifications or improvements as I saw fit to the site.
Yeah, that's one of the huge advantages of buying websites. I talk to people quite often, and they're like, well, why don't I just build a website from scratch? But by buying a website that's already profitable, you skip so much of the guesswork, like what you were just saying, what it takes to rank, keyword research. You have a website that is converting because it's obviously already making money. So it just cuts out so much of the guesswork. And moving into that, for someone that is brand new to Amazon AdSense, can you just describe in a brief detail on how this website is making money?
Sure, definitely. So it's great, I gotta say, with the internet these days, because you really can run a site where you're promoting other products where you don't actually have to physically ship the products. You don't have to do e-commerce in the traditional sense, but rather what you're doing is you're helping promote, in this case, health products, that are typically listed on Amazon. And through your site, people, are informed about the products and then are able to make better buying decisions. And then ultimately, if they buy those products on, say, Amazon, you get a commission directly from Amazon to be able to, compensate you for the information that you're providing. The AdSense model is something that is owned by Google. And those are basically content relevant ads that are displayed to the end user. So those would be something that would, again, be generally related in the health niche or whatnot. And it may not be necessarily directly product related, but could be a variety of different topics depending on what the advertiser and what Google decided to display. So it really, the nice thing about the site, and this has been in place since I acquired it, was it had really two sources of revenue, both at Amazon and from Google AdSense. So it's nice to be able to have two different streams from, two different companies as part of the revenue.
It is really cool to have a diversified income stream on the actual website itself. It's definitely an advantage that people can tweak with and expand upon. It sounds like you're fairly passionate about, health and fitness. So why are you selling the business? Why not just keep it and keep growing the income?
So trust me, I've debated this internally quite a bit for quite some time. The revenue is actually quite good on the site. And part of me just, wants to hold on to the site and not sell it and then, continue to work on it, etc. But, on the other hand, I'm also interested in sort of, building a portfolio of sites. And, to do that, I, need to basically raise more funds to do so. So I figure by kind of letting the site go and having somebody take ownership of it, I'll be able to, go forth and acquire some additional sites.
Okay, so after you're planning on selling the site to get more capital to invest into buying more websites, I'm assuming, or are you planning on building out your own sites?
I think I'll probably, stick with acquiring more websites. It's, again, one of those things where it's very easy to just go in and have a site that's ready to go, already producing revenue. It's much easier, I find, again, probably reflecting, my lack of overall kind of experience in this industry, but being able to just go and acquire a site and, have it ready to go and be able to improve it.
Yeah, absolutely. Taking the guesswork out of it is a huge advantage that I think is one of the more, underrated things that people think about when it comes to actually buying these online businesses. So the site was built in December 2014. Now, obviously, you weren't the original owner, you weren't building up, but when you did buy the actual website about 7 months ago, tell me a little bit about where the business was. What was the trajectory of the first few weeks and months that you owned it?
So in the beginning, the site was it was already, from a profit perspective, was already making a few $100s or so per month. So it was already a profitable site, and buying it, I wanted to improve it, and I basically took the existing structure. I did things like added more articles. I sort of rearranged sort of the structure so it was easier to navigate. I updated some of the products that were being reviewed to make it more relevant and more up to date. So it was something where the site was already okay. It was making revenue, and I found these different ways to improve it. And then, that actually significantly improved the revenue. So through those site changes and tweaks, the revenue grew substantially over that period of time, and especially over the holiday season, et cetera, did extremely well. So, and I think any future buyer of this, I'm sure there's plenty of things too that, could be improved beyond what I've done. And, an astute buyer would be able to take that and, hopefully double or triple that revenue going forward.
So you basically split tested like AdSense blocks where they were placed on the website and added more content. Did you also do some split testing like with Amazon affiliate links as well, or was it mainly AdSense that you were tweaking?
Yeah, I mean, ideally, I would have been very scientific about this and done split testing, like you said, and did a study around it. But for me, I kind of looked at what intuitively was sort of wrong with the site, or as an end user, what would I have done differently, or what maybe would have been more interesting to place visually. So for me, I kind of approached it a little bit more as an end user, from an end user experience, how it would kind of have worked better to go on the site. So, a lot of it was just my own different perspective. The person I purchased it from was a very experienced web developer. Maybe they approached it from a little bit different perspective. So, I think just kind of visually laying it out in a different way, seemed to click with buyers. And, I think and the result was a substantial increase in the revenue.
That's really cool. Yeah, taking a website from a few $100s to almost $2,000 on average monthly net profit. It is pretty, I would agree, is a pretty substantial increase. I think whatever method you're using is a pretty good method. So now you mentioned that you're looking to acquire more businesses. So with that said, is there anything you learned from this business that you apply to future size of businesses? Maybe something from your split testing that just worked, or some content strategy of yours that just really took off?
So I think from doing this, I think the visual layout of the site is really important. So definitely playing around with that and maybe looking at it from the end user perspective. And then, ideally, if you want to get more into it, doing things like split testing and doing a really scientific study would be ideal if you have the time and the resources to do that. I think also adding appropriate content and articles is really important, things that really resonate with the buyer, and looking around at, maybe different sites out there, whether it be Google News or BuzzFeed or whatever, and figuring out what are the interesting topics around the particular niche that you're involved with, because it may be different than what you have initially guessed, or if it's a niche you're not that familiar with, it's kind of good to do a survey of what's important to the people who are buying purchase or buying products associated with that niche.
So what have you tried that didn't work?
I would say, in general, minor changes to kind of do SEO ranking didn't seem to work. So there's a lot of these, I feel like, SEO tricks or whatever, in terms of keyword, density and things like that. I don't think those work so much, or maybe they used to work at some point, but I don't think they work anymore. I think things like Google ranking algorithms and just people in general visiting the site are a lot more sophisticated than simple little hacks or tricks. So having relevant content that is interesting to the end user, to the consumer, is probably the most important thing. And trying to tweak, a word here, keyword density there, is probably not going to be worth a webmaster's time.
Yeah, I actually agree. I think as Google's algorithm gets more and more intense, as their artificial intelligence increases, it's going to be a lot harder for those kind of tricks to work. And honestly, I think it makes SEO easier, because I don't know how many articles you've tried to written with a keyword density of like 2.3% or whatever. And it's pretty tedious, though.
Yeah, it definitely makes for a not so interesting article
Yeah,
sometimes.
it is definitely not as natural as it could be. So I think it's actually a good move overall. But I do agree, a lot of those tricks, they die out pretty quickly in the SEO game. Moving into the, speaking of SEO and traffic, let's break down how this website gets traffic. Now I know you have a Facebook page and an email list, but is your traffic mainly coming from the search engines, or is it coming from your Facebook page? Where's it coming from?
So it's mostly coming from search engines for the most part, mostly from Google. And it ranks very high for a number of keywords and phrases that are important for this niche. So that's one of the main drivers of it. There's also some direct traffic that we get as well, which can be referrals from other people, can be just typed in names, etc. The URL is pretty good, I would say, without giving it away. I think it's a very
URL is pretty good too.
I think it's a very easily kind of something that's easy to communicate over IM and that sort of thing. And it's a topic that's very interesting to a number of people out there. There's also an email list as well that has a bit over 1,000 users that have subscribed. Now, that's one area of huge improvement that the next buyer will hopefully take full advantage of, since I haven't really actually monetized the email list. I'm not as familiar with email marketing, so that's something definitely that the next buyer will be able to capitalize on quite a bit from this site. So yeah, to summarize, the main traffic sources are primarily search. There is some from the Facebook. There is a YouTube channel as well that there's some from that as well, but primarily from search.
I have a few questions here. First of all, with the email list, is that with Aweber or MailChimp? Do you know which service it is?
Yeah, so it's using Sendy. So Sendy is a kind of a self-hosted type of email service. So it's really simple to set up, and whatever the buyer wants to use, MailChimp or Aweber, they can easily export from Sendy and import to their preferred mail service.
And you haven't really emailed this list at all? Is these people just opting in from your website, I assume? Like people?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's just a simple link there, and they click on it and they subscribe. So like I said, it's something that, I plan to do. And I think somebody who has more experience in the email marketing could probably, completely make a huge amount of revenue out of this. It's something I'm definitely not as familiar with, but something that I have collected over time.
It's interesting. I think we'll probably go back to that here in a little bit when we start talking a little bit more about the opportunities. But another thing I wanted to ask is, so you have a YouTube channel as well. Is that what you said?
Yeah. It's more like a YouTube video, I should say, not as a channel per se. So it's basically a site intro kind of thing, if you will. And it's a channel is probably stretching it because it's a single video that's just promoting the site. So I mean, it's not like there's 10 million views or anything of that nature. It's something that just provides, and this was again in place before I even bought the site, but it's something I think that provides a little bit of SEO value as well as some redirection for people who discover it through YouTube.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I'm assuming the seller or the original owner, he had paid someone to make this video. It wasn't him doing it himself. Did he use Fiverr? Do you know?
Yeah, he used a service. I believe it was Fiverr. It was one of these low cost kind of services to be able to produce. It's a short, few minute video that just talks a little bit like an intro to, video about a site. It's nothing, no Star Wars, no amazing cinematic, feature, but
But there's an opportunity, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. If the buyer has video skills or whatnot, I'm sure that could be capitalized on as well.
Moving into the earnings, how stable are the earnings? You're earning a little, just shy underneath $2,000 a month. Do you find that stays relatively stable as it gone in swings? I know you've been growing it pretty aggressively, but over the last few months, how has it been?
Yeah, so definitely around the holidays, it definitely jumped up. So it was closer to maybe 2,500 a month or so around December, January. So it's definitely, and because it's a product, people are primarily going to the site and buying products. That makes sense that, around the holidays or when people feel like treating themselves, they're definitely going to be able to purchase more and such. So the revenue, though, is fairly stable, in terms of on the average, 1,800 or so a month. I definitely saw an upswing around December, January, which I assume to be holiday related.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, Amazon sites tend to kick up more, but that's a pretty good uptick from a few $100s a month, I must say. It's pretty impressive. You said you added some content on the site. Do you know how much content is actually on the site right now?
That's a good question. In terms of articles or so, there's probably I guess there would be about 15 articles or so that are written on various health topics. So not a huge amount.
Were these like pretty long articles or just like short little 500, 600 word articles?
They're about 1,000 to 2,000 words.
Okay.
So yeah, somewhere around that.
And when a buyer is looking at your website, they're looking at growing it most likely as well, like how you were when you initially bought it. How much content do you think that they should add monthly? And when you were adding this content, were you also writing it yourself or were you outsourcing the writing?
So, yeah, in terms of adding content, I think it probably depends on how aggressive they wanted to do that. I don't think it's necessary at all because it ranks so well for a number of, phrases and keywords. I don't think there probably are other keywords and phrases around this niche that would be useful. So in that sense, writing additional articles would be good. But, I would say that, since I probably added altogether, I don't know, maybe 8 articles or something of that nature. I just wrote them myself. I'm not some amazing Mark Twain or anything, but honestly, it's fairly easy to kind of research these topics and, to come up with some relevant topics for this niche.
So going into opportunities, if you wanted to grow this website further and say you were going to keep it, what would be the least risky path that you go to grow this website and really focus on it?
So for the least risky one would probably, I don't know if there's any risky option, honestly, but let's take the easiest
Don't ruin
option,
my
right?
next question, Mike.
So I would say probably what I would do if I was a new buyer of the site and I was a fairly new buyer, let's say I didn't have any web experience, I think probably the easiest would just be adding additional products. So that would be an easy thing to find some new or unique products that would be within this niche that, I probably haven't thought of. So that would probably be an easy way that even, a newbie norm, I think, as you guys call them, would be able to add immediate value.
That's definitely a good, stable way to go, especially for, someone just looking at buying a website, never done it before. Adding content, almost always a safe bet. Expanding to a few new products with the content, usually a pretty safe bet. If I was going to ask you, and let's say there was a risky way, what would you say would be an incredibly risky way to grow this website very quickly? What would you do if you were going to keep it and you just threw caution to the wind?
So I think if you had if you were already a pretty experienced internet marketer or whatnot, I think the way to do it would probably aggressively market to the email list because it's over 1,000 and the subscription rate is fairly high, honestly, for this site, I feel, because in general, like most people don't tend to opt in, or I don't think they opt in too often to email lists in general these days. But yeah, I think aggressively marketing that way would probably be extremely profitable because it's a pretty focused health niche. So I think the list would probably be very open to purchasing the right kind of products or add on sales or something of that nature.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And it could be, if the listener out there is wondering, well, this doesn't sound very risky at all, I think one of the things you got to be careful with email marketing is you don't want to be so aggressive that you burn out the list, right? Because you want to keep building value. So obviously there is some risk involved by marketing it a little bit more aggressively through email. But at the same time, if you're adding value, keep adding some good content. It's a super solid approach to building out the website. And speaking of risk, what do you think is the biggest risk with this website? Do you see a potential traffic risk or income risk like between your affiliate accounts or anything along those lines that a new buyer should be aware of before jumping in?
I think in terms of risk, I think in the web world, there's always risks that, Google will not like a site for a certain reason that it'll disappear off the search engines or something. And that kind of stuff, I guess, is a risk that could happen. Or potentially like Amazon will stop paying affiliates or something of that nature. So I think those are kind of risks that are shared between any website out there. I don't think there's any specific risks to this website. Like I said, it's a particular niche that is an evergreen niche, I feel. So it's going to always be interesting to people out there. And a lot of things in the health category really are evergreen types of things that are always interesting to a set of folks. So I think there's just general kind of internet, business risks. But for this site, I don't feel there's any specific risks. And like I said, really on the fence about selling the site. It's such a strong revenue producer. There's definitely a lot of room for growth for the right kind of individual.
Yeah, I would say I would agree with you. I don't think Amazon's going to shut down anytime soon, but they have shut down affiliate accounts before. But one of the nice things about working in an evergreen niche like yours, in my opinion, is there's just so many products out there. There's so many offers, so many different verticals you can go into. It's, like you said, an evergreen niche and pretty broad niche, but still focus on an interesting topic. So I find that pretty interesting. As far as work required, can you describe what amount of type of work you are doing for this website? What are you doing to maintain it?
Sure. Right now it was basically authoring another article every couple weeks. So, that could easily be outsourced through Fiverr, SEO clerks, or iWriter or whatever. So it's really, that's the great thing about internet businesses is like you could, sit in your pajamas at home and you're like making money. So it's one of the amazing things that still exists in this world.
I agree. There's a little side note. I remember my first affiliate check I got was $500, and I still remember the email, man. It said, "Congratulations, do a money dance. You just earned $500." Suddenly some info book back in the bum marketing days on Easy and articles. And man, I couldn't believe I was 18. I had no, 18 years old. I had no idea this even existed. I was so ecstatic.
Yeah, it's truly amazing, especially if you come, any of the buyers out there, if you come from a more traditional background, going to work every day and that sort of thing, owning a site like this is really refreshing because it's really opens up a new way to actually earn revenue. It's totally disconnecting your time from the revenue that you're making.
Yeah, the leverage is amazing. And, speaking more about what you're doing to maintain the site, what skills or requirements would you say that someone not familiar with this niche should have? Now, you mentioned you're doing the writing and you're somewhat familiar with the health and wellness niche. Is that something that they need to become familiar with to start writing high quality articles like what you're writing? Or do they need to have some other skills to help manage the website?
Yeah, so you definitely don't need to be a writer. It's actually probably more efficient to just go on like iWriter or one of these other websites. You can easily outsource that. That's not required. In terms of technical skills, it helps to be familiar with WordPress, I would say. WordPress is a really easy platform to learn, so it's not a really big learning curve. And even if you don't want to learn it, you honestly can outsource that too, which is the magic of the global economy and
The
everything.
magic of the internet.
The magic of the internet. There's, again, I think a site like this, and, honestly, if you wanted, you could just buy it and just let it run. I mean, the revenue's strong enough that, I think for the foreseeable future, it's going to have strong earnings. So it's really up to you, and it depends your skill level. I think it's a great kind of business to be, because it's already off to a solid footing. It's a great kind of business to start off with.
Yeah, one of the things I really like about your website is for most people just starting out in their career, it's job replacement income for a lot of people, or pretty
Yeah.
close to it. It's getting up there. And especially if they decide to do some geo arbitrage and decide, hey, I'm going to go live in Southeast Asia, you can live off of this website's income fairly nicely in places like Chiang Mai, Thailand, and stuff like that. So I really like that concept. Getting into more, just wrapping up some additional information here, would you be willing to sign a non-compete just to let a buyer know, like, hey, look, I'm not, you just bought my website, I'm not about to go start another website with the exact same content and niche. Would that be something you'd be open to?
Yeah, yeah, and I know when I was chatting with Empire Flippers going through the interview process, that was definitely a topic that came up. So yeah, I think that's fine if it's narrowly focused. Obviously, I wouldn't want to compete exactly in that same niche and everything like that. So like an NDA of that type, I'd be open to signing it. I think also for buyers that are new, do be aware that it's not so easy to replicate a site, like this or whatnot. It's easy, to replicate it from like just kind of copying content or whatever, but getting that ranking and getting that kind of familiarity, out there in the world and the marketing and the SEO that goes into it, that's, I think, the thing that is very difficult to duplicate. So I think you can have some assurance that, it's not so easy to copy a website as people may make it out to be.
I would agree with that. Like you said, you could copy content, Control C and Control V it, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get any traffic at all to the website. That's the real hard part, right? Is getting the traffic, getting that organic reach where people just start rolling in like clockwork. So that is one of the more defensible sides of the business. And speaking of that, say a buyer comes in, he gives the money, you hand over the website. Would you be willing to offer that buyer any kind of support, like email or maybe like a week's worth of calls or anything along that line?
Sure. Yeah, definitely. So I could definitely do a Skype call with them. I can offer some email support for say 30 days or so. That's definitely, I mean, whoever ends up purchasing the site, I definitely want them to be successful with it and hopefully more successful, than I was. So yeah, I'm more than willing to do that. And I was very lucky too. When I purchased this site, the seller was extremely helpful in just kind of making me feel comfortable and explaining how the site worked and everything like that. So I definitely would offer that up.
Excellent. That's great. I know that will quell a lot of people's fears, especially if someone is brand new. And we usually do recommend Adsense and Amazon sites for someone who's brand new. So if they hear that, that'll probably help them out, get rid of that buyer anxiety. Obviously, the best scenario is someone comes in and gives us full price. It's best scenario for you, best scenario for Empire Flippers. But would you be open to a split or earn out where, say, they gave 70% up front, 30% on closing, or maybe they did 60% up front and then gave the last 40% over a couple months based on hitting certain goals like training or support or something like that once they're comfortable with the website?
So I wouldn't, I know some sites for more expensive sites offer like, seller financing and things of that nature. I probably wouldn't be open to that, as much for the price of the site. Maybe if it was significantly more, I would consider it. But yeah, I would hope that, somebody who is serious about, going into this, I'm confident that they would, the price that they pay, they would be able to make that back. And again, hopefully more with the right approach. So I think that the price, as it stands, would be ideally paid up front.
One last question, but before I get into that, I just want to wrap up the website. So for our listeners out there, this website was built in December 2014 as a monthly net profit of $1,792 on average. That's based off a 3-month average. Right now, there's zero expenses. You can, of course, outsource content, So that would be an expense you have to take into account if you decide to grow it that way, unless, of course, you're like Mike and decide to write it yourself. With the website is included the domain, obviously, email list of 1,000 subscribers, and a Facebook page. Speaking of your Facebook page, Mike, do you know offhand how many likes you have on that page?
That's a good question.
No
It's
pressure.
not a ton. It's like, a couple hundred or something like that. It's not a massive amount.
Okay, cool.
It's just sort of more of an SEO support kind of role. And again, this was in place, before I purchased it. So it's not a massive driver of traffic per se.
Yeah, that makes sense. So my last question for you, Mike, is what is your best pitch, your elevator pitch, 30 seconds or less, on why someone should purchase this business?
So I would say purchasing the site would give you instant revenue. It has a good path to growth, and it's something that's suitable for both new and experienced webmasters alike.
That's a great answer. I think that was one of the more solid answers I've heard so far when I asked that question.
Thanks.
You must have prepared. So, for the listeners out there, if you're watching this on YouTube and you want more info, the link will be below this video and it will take you to our marketplace listing. If you're watching this on the actual listing page and you're wanting more information, you can become a depositor today. All you have to do is click the button, make a deposit, and you'll be taken to the next step in our process. So thanks again, Mike, for joining us, and look forward to seeing the next depositor on this one.
Great. Thanks so much, Greg.
No problem.